We're actually going to continue with John and my other panelists to look forward at both technologies of the future and also the mechanisms that will enable them to have an impact on our world. So what are the capital structures that we currently have, and what different kinds of capital structures would help us move forward? Talking about the money is what we do. What does this mean on the home level, and what can people do right now to provide the tech of the future? So joining me to answer all of these questions is John Bucknell, the founder and CEO of Virtus Solaris, the first low-cost space solar power system able to address the entire $8 trillion energy market. Sarah Merrick, the founder and CEO of Ripple Energy, who makes clean energy ownership affordable and accessible for everyone. And Emma Fletcher, who is the low-carbon housing director at Octopus Energy. Her career has centered on leading high-impact, high-innovation projects in real estate with a particular focus on housing, energy performance, and green energy production. Welcome, all of you. Hello. Hello. Sorry for that really rambling introduction. I'd like to start off because, John, obviously you're on stage quite recently. We had a question that Pablo said that you could answer, and I think it tails quite nicely with a question that I have, which is basically about the problem of space debris. I was talking to another of our speakers earlier this morning, and he said, eloquently, as he is an artist, that we are surrounding ourselves with loads of our own crap to the point where we won't be able to see anything in space soon. If you have the aim of putting solar panels in space, we're not just talking about the noise and how much interference might happen bringing it down, but also space debris. How big of a problem will that be?
It is not a great problem. Certainly, there is a lot of orbital assets that are in low Earth orbit, so something below 2,000 kilometers. I'm at 35,000. It's very quiet up there, fortunately. There's only been one incident of space debris impacting any satellites up in the geostationary at 35,000 kilometers, same as where we are, in the last 40 years. So you can worry about the low Earth orbit part, and frankly, the solar cycle most recently has inflated the atmosphere a bit and dragged a lot of these low orbit satellites down, and the debris comes with it. But you do have to manage the debris, and a lot of the regulators are making sure that you have plans to bring your satellites down at the end. And that's really one of the big key elements as we're putting up these bigger constellations, is having a plan to do something at the end of life. So those are the big ones that you have to worry about. If you're going to operate in that environment, you have to have a robust system. We've designed a system that is hyper modular, millions of identical elements, and they're networked together, and they can lose a large fraction of their operability and still continue to function. So you have to plan for the debris, and you also have to plan both ways, both plan at the end of the life and plan to work with it while you're operating there. But conceivably, if you put it in high orbit, you can be up there hundreds of years with no worries.
There have been challenges on the ground, and I'm interested to understand, because we're talking about capital, and obviously the proof is in the pudding, right? Can you get that energy to people's homes or to the infrastructure or to the companies that you're trying to provide energy to? There are challenges with offshore wind farms and getting that energy to the places it needs to go. Space is further away than an offshore wind farm. So how do you square that circle? I mean, would it not be easier to just do solar panels on Earth?
Yeah, so I think Pablo's touched on this, but the biggest challenge with the intermittent renewables is that the energy is generated when and where you don't want it. It's generated in the south. You guys might know there's a project to run a cable underwater from Morocco to here. Yeah. 3,800 kilometers of copper to get the sunlight to here in the UK. But the interesting about space solar is that the satellites are always above you, and you can see the ground, unlike moving it from out at sea to the ground. So most of the installed capacity, at least that's been going on in the US, are stranded because they can't get the distribution assets arranged, even on public land. So the offshore wind is a bigger challenge like that because of the right-of-way and all the other parts about building distribution. So having a distribution system built in to an energy system is key to that. But the big thing is that you can get it day or night anytime, and that trumps offshore wind. Even though offshore wind blows quite often, you have to build really big systems offshore to make it work. And then you have to get it to land where the sun's always up there. It's only about 100 miles up, and If you can design a system to do it inexpensively, you can serve those markets just as well.
There was a point that one of our audience members made just a few minutes ago about this all sounding very much like science fiction, and it all feeling very remote to your average person who's, living in a flat somewhere. Reputationally wise, and this is perhaps a question for all three of you, where do you think renewable energy sits when it comes to priorities for capital investment and also people's sentiment towards investing themselves? Have things become easier, as you were saying, Sarah, because people are seeing that they have to act? John, should we start with you?
I'll start. Certainly, I'm a few years away from a commercial product, but we already have customer orders. There's a huge demand, especially in the U.S., where there's the Inflation Reduction Act, which is big incentives to decarbonize, and so there is, to Pablos' point, probably infinite demand if you can provide the product that suits the needs. So it's there, and even for you guys have products already. I'm still a few years out, but yeah, already there's pull. So yeah.
Got a few questions from the audience, and weirdly they're kind of all directed towards you, John. So if you've got any question for the women on the panel, which would be nice, that would be great. But I'm just going to go ahead and ask you, John, if that's all right, because there's some of them that I find quite amusingly phrased. John, space solar, says one of our audience members, looks great for the future. But wouldn't it be quicker, easier, and cheaper for us to just cover the Sahara Desert in solar panels?
Great question. So if you look at all the forecasts for transition to renewables, 100%, your costs aren't going to go down. They're going to go up. Why is that? Well, when the sun doesn't shine, you need to build overcapacity to charge the non-existent batteries. And then you need a transmission line to go from the Sahara Desert to wherever it is. And believe it or not, if you look at your energy bill today, I look at mine, I pay $220 a megawatt hour in a mature market. The power plants that we have in Michigan, one nuclear power plant, and several coal-fired power plants, they've been complete and operating for 60 years. So they've been paid for. We're just operating off of the fuel costs. Of that $220, $30 is generation. The rest is transmission and distribution. All the forecasts looking forward through this transition, all of the costs are distribution charges. So yes, you could do that, but you're going to drive your energy costs up. And driving energy costs up is the opposite of what you want. If you look at historical energy use, we're 2022, we're about 14% of global GDP was energy. At high growth rates of the economy, we're down at like 3 to 4 to 5 to 6%. The energy costs are doing this, and partially it's because of the challenges around renewables. You've got to have backup generation. That backup generation, whether it's coal-fired, natural gas-fired, those systems are only operating half the time. So their amortization costs have to be doubled to pay for their operation and the capital costs. So yes, you could do that. You're going to pay more, and your energy costs are going to continue to rise. If you look at what Germany did, their energy costs are so high now that their industry is struggling to operate. And they've already had for decades the highest energy costs in Europe. And they're leaving or shutting down because they can't afford the energy they have. So what percentage of your life should be energy costs? Well, that is a great question. It should be low so you can spend your money on something else. And that's when I say universal prosperity, that's what we're talking about. It's the standard of living that you can afford to do everything you want and not be shackled with high energy costs. So if you want to make those choices, you can, but there are cheaper solutions. Certainly the nuclear, we know how to do it, we can't. There's no fighting the government on that one. But some of these other technologies, you can do the end run around the existing regulations. There's no regulations in space. It's the Wild West. You can build it, and nobody's going to tell you no. The only thing we have to deal with is spectrum allocation and working with the telecom that's already up there. So those are ways to avoid the rising energy costs that the renewable transition implies. And there also are huge challenges around finding the critical minerals you need to do all of those things. They just don't exist. You would need to have, I think, 6,000 new mines to support this transition and building lots of new transmission. So yes, we could do it using conventional technology, but we're all going to pay for it. And that's really, what do you choose to do? And this is the answer for all of you guys. what's the best path forward, right? Do what we know how to do, or do something that we haven't done yet, but also know how to do.
There's another question here which sounds either like a brilliant business idea or something off The Simpsons. So it says, is there secondary benefit of solar panels in space creating shade to reduce global warming? Just a big enough panel, an umbrella?
Yeah, you could. Again, so these satellites are a long ways up. We say that our apogee is 35,000 kilometers. That is a thousandth of a degree width for a 5-kilometer array. So if you can see that, and again, the satellite orbits we put are above and below the orbit ecliptic. So the line of sight from the sun to the Earth, these satellites are above and below it. So you're not going to shade it. But if you want to put shades in space, I would worry about the fact that we are long overdue for an ice age. Just thinking out loud here. So if you put that up there, it's hard to get rid of it, I guess would be the big challenge. So let's wait off on trying to make the Earth colder in case something like that comes along.
Very
Okay,
good. Thank
sorry.
you, John.
If it was your idea, I apologize, but it's a bad one. Okay.
I want to talk about the 2030 objective really quickly. Could you tell me whether you think we're going to make it in the UK? And if we do, what would be the thing that makes the difference?
2030 or 2050?
2030. Let's go for the 2030 one because it's closer. That's the only reason.
For me, it's planning restrictions.
Yeah.
Dead simple, really easy. We've got to get more onshore wind. We've got to get more solar. Controversially, maybe actually even putting quite large-scale solar on some of our grade 1 farmland. Yeah. Having spent 5 years working in agri-tech and stuff, we are degrading our productive food land terribly. So actually, we need to start thinking more laterally about how we should be planning this country and enabling more things to come forward in order that we can help everyone.
Brilliant. Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, given the auction, having a stable mechanism that developers can rely on to be able to bring projects forward under, otherwise, particularly for 2030, 2050 it's a bit of a different issue, but 2030, that's a big one. And unlocking onshore wind in England. There are so many projects that could come forward and they could easily come forward by 2030. It's crazy. Obviously, they need more grid as well, which is another thing. So really boring market and planning and grid. And I'm sick to death of talking about it, but that is the reality.
Thank you, Sarah. And John, space?
I can't get you there by 2030. I'm sorry.
That's
I can get you there at 2035 maybe, but 2030, I can't get you to anything by then. But certainly, you have to start leaning that direction, right? You have to start making the choices that get you where you want to go. And some of these new technologies, they are hardware. They take a little while. But yeah, the 2050, totally reasonable. 2040 is totally reasonable. 2030, I need a little help. I don't think I have, even a time machine would help me at that point. So I'll do what I can.
That's brilliant. Okay, thank you three so much for joining me. Thank you very much to our panel.